Hello and welcome to the Think Share. My name's Zach, here to bring to what I've been thinking about, sharing about, talking about, listening to, reading about that doesn't belong in math class to make you the goodest version of yourself. One of the ideas I was talking about with a friend, I met the boyfriend of one of my family members this weekend, and we were both rugby players back in college. We didn't play on the same team. We didn't meet each other before then, but we're discussing why rugby is a better sport than football. And one of the things that I think is the misunderstood part, so my father-in-law said that he played football for his high school and college career, and the moment he stepped onto a rugby pitch or a rugby field, he had this experience like, holy crap, like no one's wearing pads and we're going to hammer each other, like this is going to suck. And he said it was pretty much, he stepped on and then stepped off, and that was the only day he ever played rugby. And what I think he didn't realize, and what I think a lot of people don't realize that me and Derek have discovered together, is that rugby is actually a way safer sport than football. Here's why. Despite the fact that there's no pads, one of the things you cannot do in rugby is drop people that aren't looking. Well, I guess you can, but it happens far less frequent. So, for example, in football, a lot of us see a wide receiver going out for a pass, maybe it's 50 yards down the field, and all of a sudden you'll see a free safety or a cornerback come, either be chasing with them or coming from another direction. And, you'll see the ball come in for them to catch it, and all of a sudden they'll get hammered by the safety or the cornerback. Now, when they get hit really hard, sometimes it's head to head, sometimes it's shoulder pad to head, or helmet to helmet, but you'll see they have a new rule talking about hitting unprotected receivers, and what happens is you get a ton of these concussions because the defensive person is not getting hurt as much as the offensive person. So what happens is you have these defensive players that have no problem throwing their body weight around and feel none of the impact of it as it happens. So they drop a shoulder pad straight into your head or your helmet, and they feel little to no impact at all. And so one of the problems that creates is you have these extremely hard hits that only one of the two people are feeling. Now in rugby, it doesn't work like that. Because you have no pads, you have no helmet, when you go to tackle somebody, you are getting hit pretty much just as hard as the person that you're tackling. So when you go to actually tackle somebody, you are getting hit pretty hard as well. If you've ever had an opportunity or a moment in life where you've had to tackle somebody, like not including football, like you got to wrap. Right? The purpose of tackling somebody is so that they can't get away. And the other interesting thing about rugby is if you hit somebody and they go down, if you didn't wrap up, if you only knock them down or trip them, they can keep running. So in football, the moment that a knee or an elbow or a shoulder hits the turf, that's a moment when the ball is dead. The play is over and there's nothing else happen, obviously, unless there's a fumble or something. But in rugby, it keeps going. So if a rugby player, say they do drop a shoulder into their other person's chest and they fall down and they're like, oh yeah, I'm a tough guy, I just did that tackle. Nope, you did not just do that tackle, because they can now get up and keep running. So the synopsis here is that you can only hit people as hard as you're willing to be hit in rugby, versus football, you can hit people much harder than you're willing to feel the impact of. Because of this, we see a lot, I'm not going to say less injuries, but you see different injuries, and I would say people are a lot more aware of when they're being unsafe. Now, the dangerous part about rugby is sometimes you do have savages out there that are not afraid at all to get concussions, and they'll just come after you, and they just kind of don't care what it takes. My friend Derek that I was speaking with over the weekend, he said his very first rugby game, so one of the things in rugby is called a ruck, and it's sort of like I describe it as an organized pig pile. So in football, you see a player goes down, and then the ball stops, it's dead, and then they reset, and then you have the center and the guards and the tackles and the defensive linemen all line up on that ball. In rugby, when somebody goes down, what you do is you try to form a ruck, which is the player that got tackled that has the ball. They sort of present it back towards their own team, and the goal is for one of their teammates to come. A ruck is created by two players standing over a ball, pretty much. So it's sort of like they want to have their team fight for a ball, but it's like they're the center, and then the defensive lineman comes up, and there may be no defensive player that comes up there, but once you have that, but they've just made a tackle, so they're likely to be there. So as when my friend got tackled for the first time, someone kicked him in the head and he had to get stitches. Long story short. So you'll definitely see some different injuries because there's more exposed skin, and there's still cleats, and I mean that's pretty much the hardest thing that a player wears. I'll be honest, I didn't even wear a cup during rugby, and it actually never turned out to be a problem. But the most dangerous thing that can happen in a rugby game, for the most part, is on a kickoff. In rugby, you see a lot more onside kicks. So when they go to have those onside kicks, if you jump in the air to catch it, they cannot hit you till you hit the ground. So me being 6'5", the advantage I have is I don't necessarily have to jump to outreach a lot of people. But if I do jump, I'm going to be a little bit afraid of getting hit in midair and landing on my head or my neck. But that's why they have the sin bin and they have the penalties. So the sin bin is when you get a red card. What happens is the player, similar to soccer or hockey, is there's like a penalty box sort of thing that happens. The player literally has to stand on the opposite end of the field. They have to stand under the goalpost for a whole 15 minutes while their team plays without them. And this is when there's either when you're playing sevens, which is a 7-on-7 game, or 15-on-15 game. So 7-on-7 game, that can be a huge advantage when one of the players goes down. Now, this doesn't happen super often. I think a lot of players don't want to see each other get hurt that much. Like, we like hitting each other, we like jarring somebody. But at the same time, we're not really interested in seeing the other people get injured quite on the same level as you see in football. I think that there's a different kind of culture about rugby than football, which is, in college, you would have a rugby match, and then after the rugby match, you'd go and party with the other team. You share a drink together or something. And you really don't see that in many other sports out there. I remember my coach saying that football, actually soccer, is a gentleman's sport played by hooligans, and rugby is a hooligan sport played by gentlemen. Which, I mean, that's just fun to say because it's a nice, catchy, cliche phrase that I can use to downplay other sports besides rugby. But football, soccer there's a lot less hitting. It's just a very different sport. It's a gentleman's sport. And rugby, you're hitting people, you're wrapping people. The rucks and those organized pig piles get nasty, and it is a hooligan sport. But I think the interesting second part of that phrase is talking about the type of people that play it. And you see some football players out there, or soccer players. Their actions are very interesting. Versus, I think, because it is a hooligan sport in rugby, you see a lot more people be reasonable and consider the consequences to their actions. If you lead head first, that you're looking at a serious neck injury or a head injury, and we're smart enough to think past that sometimes. I know I was. The worst injury I had was, I don't even think I had a sprained ankle. I think I've twisted some ankles, but that's been the majority of my injuries in rugby. So yeah, I just wanted to say a little bit about rugby, as it's a sport that I've really come to love, especially sevens. There's a lot of running involved. I recommend, if you have not played rugby before and you're a big fan of football, I would invite you to join and play rugby, as I think there's some really interesting things that are developed through rugby, and I think there's some different mentalities that I think can really develop a person. Another sort of interesting thing that you wouldn't think much of until you've experienced it, but I would say that rugby players are very comfortable with their sexuality. Here's why. That might have seemed very out of the blue. So in a scrum, so a scrum is where in a 15-on-15 game, you have 8 players that line up in such a way that all of their shoulders and butts are interlocked. So you got 3 guys, just try to imagine this. You got 3 guys standing there at the front, and what they're doing is, it's almost like they're taking a picture where they got their arms wrapped around each other, but the 2 bigger guys, your props, and your middle guy, the hooker, because he's going to try to hook the ball with his foot. The props take their inside arms that are behind the hooker, and they grab the shirt of the hooker. And so he's got this shirt really tightly wrapped around him because the 2 guys are pulling on it. The idea is for them to be very tight. And then from there, you got your locks. Those are your slightly taller guys, not necessarily bigger. And what they're going to do, and just imagine this. So you got 3 guys standing in the front row. Second row, and I would say just Google this right now if you're really having a hard time imagining it, and I was a lock, is we take our head and we shove it in between the hips of the 2 guys in front of us. So you get 2 gaps. It shouldn't really be gaps, but you got to make a gap with your head. You get 2 gaps in between the left prop and the left hip of the hooker, and the right prop and the right hip of the hooker. And you get those 2 guys are also fairly tightly wrapped. We got one hand on each other's shirt, trying to lock up tight so that we are like one unit together. And so we put our heads in between their hips, and the thing we do with our other hand is we actually bring our hand up into the sort of crotch area of the prop in front of us and grab that. We're just grabbing their pants. We're not grabbing their actual body parts, but we're just trying to grab sort of their, I guess you would say their waistband or something. So the interesting thing that happens out of that, because I mean, for a man's team, it's a bunch of guys getting really close with each other, and you don't see that every day. You don't see people getting that close and cuddly with each other in such a high testosterone sport. And so I think the interesting thing that happens is a lot of us get really comfortable with being that physically close with each other. And I think when you look at football culture and a lot of cultures of other types of sports, you don't see the kind of comfort that players have with touching each other and being with each other. I will say that you'll see some butt slapping out there on the football field and other sports, but I think there's just a really interesting bond that happens, and it's not a sexual or romantic bond by any means. It's just a serious level of comfort that this group of men kind of have together. And I think because of that, it's like I said, a very high testosterone sport, you see them be very comfortable. And I had a really cool group of guys that I was on a team with in college, and I was always really proud that they were comfortable with their sexuality, because I think one of the things that scares me a little bit about this kind of, I want to call it bro culture, is people say the words no homo, and people talk because when someone says something like that, what that means is they're actually concerned someone thinks they're a homosexual by some action that they just took. And so for you to be concerned enough to say no homo signifies to me that, one, you're not comfortable enough with your sexuality, that if someone were to assume that you're homosexual, that would be a problem. To be honest, I don't care if people think I am homosexual or not. I'm married, I'm straight, and that's not a problem for me. But people that are uncomfortable with it really feel the need to point out, that was a not homosexual thing that just happened there. And I think that despite hearing a bit of that throughout college, I would say that the amount of things that could be misinterpreted as homosexual, that I'll bet there were a ton more on a rugby team than you would see maybe on a football team or a hockey team or something, just because we're so often physically that close together. We've gotten used to it. And so that's one thing I'm really proud about with my fellow rugby guys. I think I want to say more on like the liberal side of things. And you just see a really cool bond happen between them, and a comfort level that you don't see in many sports. I know I kind of went off on a tangent there, but I hope people understood what I was trying to get at here. So I just wanted to present some of the values and really cool things that I think happen in the sport of rugby that you don't see on the football field, you don't see in other sports. And I recommend people take some advice and some coaching and inspiration from the Aussies and the New Zealanders, because in America, or at least in Massachusetts where I grew up, everyone kind of grows up playing soccer. It doesn't really matter what you're good at. Seems like everyone plays soccer, but apparently out there, everyone plays rugby. And in California, I guess everyone plays volleyball. So there's just some of these sports that like a whole population just plays, because that's just one of the sort of cultural, social norms out here. So I think that rugby is a great sport for people to learn. I'm going to add in one more thing, and this might be another 5-10 minute tangent, so bear with me. But I think it's really important, is I think in terms of leadership, what I think a good leader does is they lead by example. And they are not always the first to take credit for things, and they're not always going to be the people that get highlighted. Like, I would say that Bill Belichick, as I am a New Englander, is a pretty good leader, because one, he's had some success on the field, but at the same time, I think he is not one of the people that takes credit when his team wins. Even Tom Brady when you hear him in post-game interviews, he does a great job acknowledging his fellow teammates, and it's not all about him. And I think a lot of the great athletes out there, you'll see some things like that, as they're all very humble. I think that's what a good leader is. And one of the things I think that's interesting about football is the people that you notice, the quarterbacks, the wide receivers, the running backs, some of the defensive players that score or cause extra turnovers, they're the ones that are really sort of popular. And in rugby, I think the interesting thing is, because of the way that the ball is handled, where you can only pass backwards, so you can't pass forwards, you will see a lot more players touch the ball. So in a 15-on-15 game, 13 out of the 15 players might end up touching that ball. It's not just a one player touches the ball kind of game. So it really gets passed around, which I think is, one, that's pretty cool. Two is that you support each other. So the guy running with the ball is out front. In football, you have blockers. So you have guys that go out there, deal with the crap of the defense, and they kind of fight them off, and then the running back goes around them, and so they get to take advantage of the advantage that their teammate has given them. And I think what's interesting in rugby is you have to sort of forge your own path. So if you don't get through some of those guys, or you're about to get tackled, you hand it off to a support member. And what that is when I say support member, the way that you want to run with your teammates is, say somebody has the ball. You want to be right on their hip, depending how fast they're going. If they're going pretty fast, maybe you want to be about 10 feet back or so. But you want to be running right behind them, to the left or to the right. And the idea is, if they're about to get tackled, you want to be there for support for them to offload. Offload being when you're about to get tackled and you pass the ball to a teammate that is still running full speed right behind you. So as you're getting tackled, you're making a pass so that your team gets to keep moving. So I think what's valuable about that, the idea of support, is that people have to go out there and be the first one in line to take a hit. There's no blockers, and you have support staff. You have people that are helping you, that are right behind you there the rest of the way, and they're there to make sure that the team wins. And I think when you have a sport like football, where you have a quarterback and you have a wide receiver and there's really no support unless it's like a hook and ladder or an option play, you're always going to have blockers. And I think this idea of having the leader be the first one out there and then they hand it off to somebody if they're about to get in trouble, I think that that's a really cool dynamic that it kind of breeds and teaches that if you're going to be a good leader, you got to do it first. You don't have people go do it for you. You don't have blockers out there for you. I'm not sure if I articulated that well, but I hope that some of you understood it. I really think it's a cool kind of concept that has a parallel metaphor sort of with leadership. So let me know what you think. Leave me, since this is Anchor, I'd love to hear some call-ins and have people ask me questions about rugby. It's not my main focus of things that I like to talk about, but it is something that's close to my heart, as I think I grew as a person with the game, and I learned a lot about myself and a lot about camaraderie and culture and having good teammates, which I played a lot of track and field in high school, and that's an individual sport, so you don't necessarily learn a ton about having a team in such an individual sport, besides people that motivate you to get out there and run and be the best version of yourself, the goodest version of yourself. So that's all for today. Thank you for listening so much. Again, call in if you have other questions. I'd love to answer about rugby. I think it's a great sport. I'd love to see more people play it. I'd love to bring it to the high school that I work at here in Massachusetts. And there have been a couple actions that I've been taking, but at the same time, I'm not really hammering it home. It's not like one of my biggest passions. I get other things that I'm also interested in. So, I look forward to hearing your comments and questions and etc. Have a great day. Thank you for listening, and stay weird. Yikes!